These two small-time thugs dared to show up at the construction site and cause trouble, but they had no idea that the ordinary-looking foreman was actually the fierce Jason Statham. The thugs stood no chance of fighting back. In just a few moves, Jason made them obedient and submissive. Seeing that the thug's buddy still looked unconvinced, Jason directly pulled out a big weapon from behind his back. If they still dared to cause trouble, Jason wouldn't mind making their heads explode. The thugs then reluctantly left the construction site. Who would have thought that Jason stopped raising bees and switched to being construction foreman? But there's still some ignorant people who like to mess with dangerous things. Jason has no choice but to take down the whole gang single-handedly with a gun. The male protagonist, Levon, is a legend in the world of covert operations, but later he grew tired of the life of constantly risking his life. So, Levon directly chose to retire, changed his identity to become a construction foreman, and had a very good relationship with his boss's 3-person family. That day, the boss's daughter, Jenny, had just finished a semester. She wanted to celebrate with some of her college friends. The boss reluctantly agreed to foot the bill, but just then, Levon happened to look outside and noticed a black car from elsewhere entering the construction site. Stepping out were some guys who looked like they weren't to be messed with. Levon realized the situation wasn't right and immediately went over, casually picking up a metal barrel along the way. 2 small fry thugs dared to open their mouths and curse. So Levon had to show them what a tough man is. Levon quickly snatched the crowbar and used it to hook the pistol from the small thug's hand, easily subduing both of them. Seeing that more people were arriving as reinforcements, Levon had no choice but to take out a homemade pistol he had hidden and point it straight at one of their necks. The others then realized they had bumped into someone stubborn. They quickly and obediently raised their hands and left the construction site. Jenny, standing on the side observing the entire process, was also extremely shocked. She never expected that Uncle Levon, who usually didn't reveal his talent, was actually someone with such ability. After finishing work at the construction site, Levon drove to the front of his in-law's house. There was a weekend celebration party being held there, but in reality, today was the day Levon got to visit his daughter. Levon hurriedly called his daughter into the car, but immediately his father-in-law went over and sarcastically hinted at Levon, saying that he didn't see him coming home so diligently when his daughter was still alive. Clearly, his father-in-law was extremely dissatisfied with his son-in-law. Levon silently accepted all of his father-in-law's reproaches. He had indeed neglected his wife in the past. Afterward, the father and daughter went to a small diner to eat. Levon gave his daughter the gift he had prepared. When she opened it, it was a photo of her mother. Because her grandfather had hidden all the photos of her mother, his daughter had even started to not remember her mother's face clearly anymore. Fortunately, Levon showed her this photo. Later, Levon went to the lawyer's office and told them what had happened that day. His father-in-law was trying to provoke Levon so that he would get physical in order to strip Levon of his custody rights. Currently, the father-in-law's lawyer claimed that Levon suffered from a stress disorder and therefore accused him of having violent tendencies. The father-in-law's side advocated reducing the visitation time from 2 hours per week to 1 hour every 2 weeks. Levon felt amused as soon as he heard this. I served the country for over 20 years, and now, because of these things, I become a dangerous element. He must fight to the end. Levon gave the lawyer all $10,000 he had painstakingly saved, asking him to help him regain his rightful rights. The lawyer was curious as to why the father-in-law harbored such deep resentment. Levon told the truth. His wife had suffered from depression for many years. That day, when Levon was on a mission overseas, his wife unfortunately committed a foolish act. Levon, therefore, had to endure the father-in-law's blame. The lawyer, after listening, told Levon to prepare himself psychologically because the father-in-law had hired a team of top-tier lawyers. Once he loses a case, Levon will have to pay so much compensation that he'll be left with nothing. Later that evening, Jenny and her classmates went to a nightclub to have a good time. The young girls fully released their stress on the dance floor, completely unaware of the danger approaching. On the second floor, someone was secretly taking pictures of them dancing. Afterward, the thugs targeted Jenny, the most beautiful one. When Jenny, drunk, went to the bathroom to vomit, the man with bad intentions took the opportunity to knock her unconscious and take her away. The next day, Levon, who was penniless, arrived at the construction site on time to work and earn money. As a result, he saw several police officers walking out of the office. After inquiring with the owner couple, with their faces full of worry, he learned that Jenny had been missing since Friday last week. It was now Monday, and she still hadn't returned. But the police only recorded the information superficially. The owner couple was now extremely worried. The boss knew that Levon was exceptionally skilled, so they wanted to ask Levon to help find Jenny. Levon initially didn't want to agree because he was determined to stay away from that life. Therefore, even though the boss offered $5 million, Levon still refused. But in reality, Levon's heart truly felt a little unwilling. After getting off work, he drove to his old friend Gunny's place. Years ago, Gunny and Levon were colleagues and also notorious cold-blooded killers. But now, Gunny's eyes were almost blind. After hearing the entire story about Jenny, Gunny advised Levon 1,000 times not to let himself have any regrets. If he wants to do it, just do it boldly, and he must go all out. So, the next day, Levon went to the boss's house. At this time, because his beloved daughter's life and death were still unknown, the boss seemed to have aged several years in just one night. Seeing this, Levon felt deeply empathetic in his heart. Years ago, when his wife passed away, he had painfully left the Royal British Marine Corps. Levon didn't want to see Jenny die an untimely death, so he solemnly told the boss that he would definitely rescue Jenny. Immediately after, Levon went to the bar where Jenny had disappeared to investigate. Before long, he discovered that this bar wasn't simple at all. The bar owner was secretly dealing flour with a very large transaction volume. After identifying the target, Levon went to the alley behind the bar. He saw that the surveillance cameras here had been intentionally vandalized. In addition, he picked up Jenny's dropped earring on the ground. Not long after, the bar owner closed up shop and drove away directly. He had no idea that his car had been fitted with a tracking device. Levon relied on the GPS location to easily find the other party's house. He easily picked up the lock and entered the room with a gun, shocking the bar owner. Levon took away the other party's gun, forcing him to ask who had kidnapped Jenny. Unexpectedly, he still wanted to shamelessly lie and fabricate a story that Jenny left on her own because she was drunk. Levon let out a cold laugh. The scene shifts. The man has been pushed into the swimming pool to carry out the drowning punishment. Levon turns on the faucet, pouring water onto the cloth covering the other party's face. The terrifying feeling of suffocation causes a man to struggle violently, but he still stubbornly refuses to confess, even saying that the forces behind the kidnappers aren't something Levon can touch. But before Levon could ask for a specific name, the man's accomplices arrived at the door. Levon had no choice but to use the man as a meat shield by holding him in front with a gun, then instantly shooting the accomplices dead. He opened the dead man's shirt to check, and his heart immediately became heavy. The tattoo on his chest proved that he was Russian. Levon took the identification documents and a large sum of money from the house and quickly left the scene. The next day, Levon ambushed at the door of the apartment and saw a luxury car appear there. Levon immediately took notice of this car. He saw 3 people get out of the car and go into the room. They were all members of the Russian Brotherhood, a mafia organization, including one who was a high-ranking member of the gang. The people who were killed were underlings of the gang. Looking at the traces of the scene, the 3 seemed to have died together. But the boss Wolo discovered that the money he had earned from trading had disappeared. At this moment, Wolo noticed that the wounds on the corpses were caused by a shotgun, but there was no shotgun in the room. Clearly, it was caused by an outsider. But who would dare break into someone's house to rob and kill on the Russian Brotherhood's turf? Immediately after, the cleanup crew, who specialized in handling corpses of the gang, arrived at the apartment to clean up thoroughly. Wolo led his men to prepare to leave. Levon immediately drove after them, heading straight to the front of a villa in the suburbs. This was Wolo's hiding place. Levon silently sneaked into the dense forest and installed a device to monitor every action of the people in the house. He saw Wolo lay hands on a woman. After a fierce argument, the woman angrily drove away. At this time, Wolo was the only one left in the house. When Levon entered the villa, he intentionally wore a hat so that the cameras wouldn't record his face. Then, he poured a cup of hot coffee straight onto Wolo's face, causing him to painfully faint. When he woke up again, he was tied to a chair and placed right at the edge of the swimming pool, his life hanging by a thread. Wolo immediately reacted. The person in front of him was a guy who broke into his house to kill and rob. He immediately said that he was a high-ranking member of the Russian Brotherhood. If Levon did this, he would be hunted down by the Russian Brotherhood for 3 generations. Unexpectedly, Levon directly slapped him hard in the face, even saying it was on behalf of the woman from earlier. Wolo was immediately dumbfounded. What did his hitting his wife have to do with an outsider? Levon, upon hearing that, delivered another slap, and then threw all the money that Wolo had been obsessing over in his face, then took out a photo of Jenny for him to identify. Wolo then realized that Levon had killed 3 of his subordinates for just one woman. At this time, Wolo still believed that Levon wouldn't dare kill him, so he resolutely refused to cooperate. But he never expected that Levon would kick him into the swimming pool with one foot. Wolo's lifelong illustrious reputation was thus shattered. Afterward, Levon obtained a phone recording, the content of which accused Demi of bringing trouble to his house. Levon immediately followed this clue to investigate further. The cleaner came to clean up Wolo's corpse again. The death of a high-ranking member also caused the Godfather's boss to show his face. He came to the house to check the surveillance cameras, discovering that the perpetrator didn't care about money. So, what exactly was the cause of the crime? He ordered his men to quickly find this person. At the same time, Jenny, who had been missing for several days, was being held in a cell. When someone came in to deliver food, Jenny hurriedly explained that her parents had always been kind and had never had conflicts with anyone. They must have arrested the wrong person. Unexpectedly, something she said angered the food deliverer, so she immediately held a knife to Jenny's neck. Jenny was no longer the pampered princess in this place. If she wanted to survive, she had to obediently listen. The first order the woman gave was to tell Jenny to obediently eat her food. Early the next morning, Levon made a phone call to contact Detective HK, asking his old friend to help him investigate a gangster named Simon. The other party was very likely involved in human trafficking and selling flour. HK understood the seriousness of the situation and immediately told Levon that Simon had a bar in Joliet, where he sold high-purity ice flour to the Russians. He was very likely to be there. Afterward, Levon drove nonstop to the bar and went straight to the bar counter to sit down. During that time, he also intentionally looked around. As expected, the girl Artemis, who was closely monitoring the surveillance cameras, immediately noticed that Levon was acting suspiciously and that he had a gun in his bag. She even suspected that Levon was a police officer who come looking for them, so she told the henchman Viper to go outside and confirm. Viper directly sat down next to Levon. Seeing this, Levon pulled out a stack of bills from his pocket, implying that he had come to do business. Viper then led him inside to meet Simon. Simon smiled and asked Levon why he brought a gun to see him. Levon calmly replied that he was just protecting himself from any unforeseen circumstances. After all, this profession is full of risks. But Artemis told Simon that Levon's demeanor looked very similar to a police officer. Hearing this, Simon immediately became vigilant and demanded that Levon hand over the gun in his bag. Levon, of course, refused, so the henchmen in the house immediately surrounded him. Levon, without changing his expression, swung his fist as big as a sandbag and punched the opponent hard. Levon's movements were swift and he delivered vicious blows, knocking down one person with each punch. In the blink of an eye, he had knocked down several people, but the more fiercely he fought, the more Simon liked it. Seeing Levon smash a bottle of wine and prepare to take ruthless action, Simon hurriedly spoke up to stop him. He stood up and shook Levon's hand, feeling the countless calluses on Levon's hand. Clearly, these were the hands of a manual laborer. At this moment, Simon believed that Levon wasn't a police officer. Levon also explained that he used to be a soldier, which is why his skills were so good. Simon invited Levon to sit down and talk more. Levon frankly said that he wanted to open a new route. He needed 4 pounds of good flour each month. Moreover, his supplier in Chicago had gone missing. Plus, Simon's reputation for goods was very big. So he came looking for him. After hearing this, Simon frowned slightly, pondered for a moment, and then readily agreed at a price of $1 million per pound. He told Levon to come to the designated pancake shop at 7 o'clock tomorrow for the first transaction. The next day, Levon arrived at the pancake shop on time. Viper and Artemis were already waiting there, but after receiving the money, they didn't give Levon the goods. Instead, they threw a phone at Levon. Before long, Simon called Levon through this phone. The goods turned out to have been placed under the steering wheel long ago. After Levon hung up the phone, he threw the expensive goods he had just bought into the water. In the evening, Artemis brought the girl to buy her, but an unexpected incident occurred during the inspection. The girl, who was supposed to be unconscious, bit the man. He immediately angrily told Artemis to take the girl away. On the other side, Levon received a call from Simon, who said that an important person wanted to meet him tomorrow. Simon told him to bring the money and dress neatly. The next day, Levon wore a stylish suit to the meeting location. The person who came was named Demi, the real boss behind the scenes. Demi was also the son of the man who died in the swimming pool. But he didn't follow his father into the Russian Brotherhood. Instead, he built his own business dealing in flour and trafficking people. Demi was very cautious. First, he asked Levon to hand over his business card for inspection. After confirming that there were no problems, he continued the discussion. Then, the two sides exchanged money for goods, initially reaching a long-term cooperation agreement. But after Levon returned home, he resolutely destroyed the expensive goods he had just bought. After that, he continued to search for clues. In several photos taken before Jenny went missing, there was a silhouette of the henchman Viper. Levon again rummaged through the phone he had taken from the bar owner's accomplice that night. Sure enough, he found information related to Jenny. So, Levon immediately returned to that bar at night, ambushing at the entrance to continue searching for clues. But unexpectedly, Artemis discovered him one step ahead. Levon sensed danger and hurriedly stole a motorcycle, then quickly fled the scene. The pursuers hurriedly got into their cars. Sticking close to Levon, bullets rained down on him. Levon weaved nimbly through the narrow alleys, yet not a single bullet hit him, causing those behind him to go crazy. They hurriedly split up to try to intercept the motorcycle. Unexpectedly, Levon, with a skillful tail flick, easily escaped the encirclement, but never imagined that he would crash straight into a police car ahead. Levon was finally forced to stop, but what was worse was that Demi had bribed the local police. The black female police officer even rewarded Levon with a gun, but then handed him over to the henchmen who were chasing him. These two people were the Godfather's sons. They dragged Levon into the car, forcing him to ask why he was looking for Demi. Levon again mocked the two men dressed like circus performers, causing both of them to become angry and retort loudly that the clothes they were wearing were custom-made high-end apparel. Unexpectedly, they fell for Levon's sowing discord strategy. He took advantage of the two people not paying attention, unexpectedly struggling to resist, then quickly snatching a pistol. The remaining two people desperately tried to stop him. The driver, seeing this, slammed on the gas. Unexpectedly, this made it even easier for Levon to act. The car lost control and crashed into an obstacle. The car was immediately overturned by the riverbank. Levon was the first to regain his composure. He quickly picked up the pistol and, without hesitation, shot the remaining two people dead. Immediately after, he kicked the out-of-control car into the water. But unfortunately, the Godfather still found corpses. The death of his sons made him even angrier. At the same time, Artemis and Viper tremblingly arrived at the bar, sitting down next to Demi. Because the last time they hosted a guest, there was an incident with Jenny, which caused a VIP to be bitten nearly half his face. Demi had to compensate $20 million for this matter. This made him extremely angry. He almost cut off one of Viper's fingers. Fortunately, Demi finally calmed down. Now the client is demanding that Jenny be killed for everything to be considered settled. On the other side, the Godfather summoned the high-ranking members of the Russian Brotherhood to talk. He recounted a series of recent deaths in the Brotherhood truthfully to the others, but Simon, who knew the whereabouts of that person, was now nowhere to be found. The Godfather hoped that everyone could quickly find Levon. Then, the Godfather led his men to storm Demi's territory. The henchmen rushed up and fired an entire magazine, causing the guests in the bar to panic and flee in all directions. The methods of purging by the mafia boss were indeed cruel. Simon's face turned pale, but he didn't dare to resist. The Godfather told his unfilial son that his father had drowned in the swimming pool, and his two sons were also killed. Demi's expression immediately turned ugly after hearing this. The Godfather immediately understood that Demi really didn't know about this. At the right time, the henchman presented a photo of Levon. Demi was so frightened that his face turned pale. He hurriedly explained that he really didn't know that this person was the murderer. They had only met once during the transaction, and after that, there was no more contact. But Demi had a photo of Levon's fake documents. The Godfather then led his men out of the bar. Afterward, relying on the photo, they quickly found out Levon's true identity, as well as detailed information about his father-in-law and daughter. The father-in-law, completely unaware of what was happening, was doing yoga following TV when suddenly two uninvited guests broke into the house. At the same time, Levon received a phone call. The teacher at school said that the child's grandfather still hadn't come to pick her up after school. Levon then quickly went to the school to pick up his daughter. The little girl curiously asked what was wrong with her grandfather. She said she had sent more than 30 messages, but he still hadn't replied. Did her dad kill her grandfather? Levon almost burst out laughing after hearing this. But Levon also told his daughter the truth, that he had done some dangerous things in the past, and now someone was chasing him. So he didn't want his family to be hurt because of this. Seeing that his father-in-law's location was still at the house, Levon turned the car around and sped toward it, and was shocked to discover that his father-in-law's house was on fire. He told his daughter to stay where she was, then charged into the sea of fire alone, rescuing his talkative father-in-law, who was still barely breathing. And after his father-in-law woke up, his attitude towards Levon finally softened a little. Afterward, he was taken to the ambulance. Levon drove his daughter to Gunny's house in a remote place. Gunny knew that his brother must have encountered big trouble. Otherwise, with Levon's ability, he wouldn't have had to flee so miserably. But even now, Levon still hadn't given up on finding Jenny. He thought that if he could find Viper, he might find Jenny's whereabouts. After hearing this, Gunny didn't throw cold water on his old friend. Instead, he led Levon to see some cool stuff. Inside the small room was crammed with all kinds of weapons. These were all the items Gunny had been collecting for a long time. Levon picked up an M14 rifle with no serial number. This type of gun has great power and a long range. It was indeed a sharp knife handed to a god of war. In the evening, Levon finished packing his things and promised his daughter that he would definitely return safely. At the same time, Artemis and Viper were preparing to find a place to dispose of Jenny. Unexpectedly, Jenny's grandfather was an Air Force officer. She had been taught by her grandfather since she was a child and had a certain self-defense ability. Jenny found an opportunity to unexpectedly attack, causing the car to lose control and crash into a tree trunk. Jenny quickly got out of the car first and ran desperately into the dense forest, then found a place to rub against to break the rope tying her hands. Before long, Artemis and Viper had completely lost track of Jenny, causing Artemis to angrily curse continuously. If they didn't complete the mission, both of them would be finished. As for Jenny, she relied on instinct to continue running away, finally seeing the police car symbolizing hope. But Jenny at this time completely didn't expect that the police could collude with the bad guys. Before long, the police car took her to a remote house. By the time Jenny realized that something was wrong, she had missed the best opportunity to escape. But the situation unexpectedly turned. The client, who had been bitten, made a video call to Artemis. He was addicted to that feeling again and told the two to quickly bring the filthy Jenny over. At the same time, Levon charged into Demi's bar alone. The guards didn't even have time to react before Levon used a knife to indiscriminately take care of them. After that, he used the corpses as bait to assassinate the next guard. Then, he completely opened fire, shooting the other party to pieces with one person, one gun. Before long, the bar was littered with corpses, just as Demi was about to kidnap a hostage. In the next second, Levon accurately shot through the palm of his hand. Levon took out Jenny's photo, forcing her to ask for her whereabouts. Demi hesitated for a while, then said he would take him to find the person. On the car, Levon took out a photo of Viper. Only then did he learn that Viper was responsible for selecting the girls, and then taking the selected girls back. Demi even dared to mock that Viper was the head of the Human Resources Department of their bar, causing Levon to angrily punch him hard in the face. Then, following Demi's instructions, the two arrived in an extremely secretive building. There were even armed guards guarding the entrance. Levon once again confirmed with Demi that Jenny was in this building. After receiving the answer, Levon dragged Demi out of the car. Without saying a word, he kicked him into the water and then fired 2 shots to send him to meet his father. Levon again took out his equipment and straightened his face. He took a deep breath, then quietly moved toward the building, using night vision binoculars to see the enemy in the tree. Levon remembered the position and then drew his pistol, shooting the other party dead. On the other side, Simon suddenly received a report that Levon had bathed Demi's bar in blood and was currently on his way to Demi's lair. He quickly gathered his brothers, brought weapons, and rushed over to offer his head to Levon. At this time, Levon had successfully approached the outside of the building. An unlucky guy who just ran outside to breathe some air unexpectedly was dealt with by Levon using a knife in the next second. Jenny, on the other hand, was being hung up by Viper and Artemis inside the house. Artemis invited the customer over from the gambling table. It turned out he wanted to torture Jenny cruelly to avenge being bitten in the face. In a moment, screams echoed throughout the room. Levon, holding the M14, charged in. The henchmen, though also holding weapons, were fundamentally no match for Levon. Levon's shots were unerringly accurate, He was like a war god possessing the body of bronze and the skin of iron. Even though there were so many opponents, he wasn't hit by a single shot. At this moment, Simon led a group of reinforcements to the scene. Unfortunately, even though they appeared very imposing, the difference in strength was too great after all. Levon didn't even bother to raise his eyelids, just rotated the gun a few times, causing those few people to immediately fall into eternal sleep. Seeing that his henchmen were useless, Simon had to charge forward himself. At this time, Levon had just finished firing all his bullets, so he found opportunity to knock Simon's gun away. The two began close combat, wielding daggers, but Simon couldn't even withstand 2 moves before Levon's sharp knife pierced straight into his neck. Levon changed the spare magazine. In the next second, he heard Jenny's cries for help. He immediately followed the cries to find her. That client didn't even have time to say a word before Levon shot him dead on the spot. As for Viper, after shooting all his bullets, he was pinned down and brutally beaten by Levon. Levon delivered an elbow strike, and Viper's neck immediately broke. Jenny also took the opportunity to use her legs to squeeze Artemis until the other party completely stopped struggling. Levon used 2 hammer strikes to break Jenny's chains. As a result, there was a third wave of people rushing outside. 2 policemen, who had just received a report, were turned into sieves by the blonde-haired guy firing an entire magazine. Then these 2 and Levon broke out in a fierce gunfight. Levon used a device on his chest to clearly see the positions of the 2 people, raised his gun, and shot the blonde-haired guy dead. Seeing this, the bald guy hurriedly sat down to hide, while Levon casually threw a grenade that landed accurately near the bald guy. At this time, the last enemy was finally eliminated. Levon hurriedly led Jenny away. Outside, the Godfather was left alone, plus the remaining members of the Russian Brotherhood had decided not to continue pursuing Levon. Otherwise, it would only increase useless casualties. Faced with this scene, the Godfather could only roar helplessly. Afterward, Levon brought Jenny back to her parents. He also successfully reunited with his daughter, and the story comes to an end here. This is the next collaboration between Jason Statham and director David Ayer after The Beekeeper. This film continues their characteristic fiery action style. Jason Statham, at the age of nearly 60, has dedicated authentic close-quarters combat scenes. The stereotypical villain characters and the swift narrative rhythm can be regarded as a template for mass-produced entertainment action film. But this industrialized production also reveals the fatigue of the genre. The box office revenue and reviews of the film show a clear cultural difference. Overseas markets, especially North American audiences, flocked to see it. After 3 days of release, it won the box office champion. When the lone hero motif sweeps everything and encounters aesthetic boredom, Hollywood's industrialized formula seems to make it difficult to conquer the world globally. The value of a film lies in its reputation, and the value of a film review lies in feeling. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the film.